Okay. Ben Shapiro does not think Tucker Carlson is creating a third party. So I am going to be reacting to his video. Only the part where he talks about Tucker Carlson.
Go on, but I wanted to sign into chat because I'm getting a lot of questions today, a lot of texts, a lot of disturbed phone calls about Tucker Carlson's announcement that he wants to start a third party. And I just want to point out that there are, in fact, as we approach the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, there are, in fact, two forces that wish to wreck America, stern to stem, that seek to destroy it: the DSA left and the woke right, and they are coming together. I'll explain in just a moment. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So here's where we are as we close in on our 250th anniversary as a country. The things that matter most to the United States, to Americans, are under assault. Core principles, things like freedom of speech and freedom of religion and private property, these things are under assault. The very idea of America being an amazing place, a place that is good and great, the idea of American peace through strength, all of these things are currently under assault. On the left, of course, the DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, are eating the Democratic Party wholesale. These are not kind of normal Democrats who are just worried about tax rates or entitlement programs. They truly despise the country, and they are full-scale socialists. Here was Zohran Mamdani just yesterday talking about the magic of Marxist economics. Collective warmth of collectivism. So much so, by the way, that he is now calling on people to set their thermostat at 78 degrees in New York City. You know, got to turn this place into Paris as fast as humanly possible. The smell of trash must waft through the city streets. But here's the thing, this whole discussion, but also the Senate. So Real Clear Politics has, it's not.
City has the right to a safe workplace, and that includes safety in extreme heat.
But here's the thing, this whole discussion about the DSA and what they've been doing in big cities and now in Colorado and all the rest, it's not just fun and games. It actually has consequences. The Democratic Party is, in fact, on the verge of taking over not just the House in the midterm elections, but also the Senate. So, real clear.
Okay, I am not worried about the Democrats winning the Senate. Like if I'm a Republican, I'm worried about them winning the House. I think Republican will easily keep the Senate. And I saw a poll like yesterday, like from CNN, from CNN, they said Republican chance at winning the House increased by 9%. So they had like a 60% chance of winning the House, and now they have a 69% chance of winning the House. So that's the Republican.
Politics has a rundown on the polling averages in the crucial Senate races. These are all seats that are currently held by Republicans that could go to Democrats. In North Carolina, Democrats are up. In Ohio, dead heat. In Maine, that is Graham Plattner, the Nazi tattoo guy, versus Susan Collins, dead heat. In Texas, James Talarico, Sunday school howdy doody with the LGBTQ flag. That dude is in a dead heat with Ken Paxton. In Iowa, dead heat. In Alaska, dead heat. That's 6 seats. If Democrats were to win 4, they would take control of the Senate. If they win 6, they're at 53 seats. Nate Silver, the statistician, he says that there's about an 80 to 90% shot Democrats take the House, and there's a 40% shot they take the Senate. And remember, increasingly, these are not establishment Democrats. These are not John Fetterman moderate Democrats. These are Democrats.
Honestly, I do not take Nate Silver seriously as an. You know what? I'll retract what I have to say. I don't take Nate Silver seriously when it comes to election prediction. Midterm, I don't know.
Democrats who are enthralled to the DSA. They understand which way the winds are blowing, and they're moving in the direction of those winds.
Yeah, an example of someone who goes where the wind is blowing is Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly goes where the wind is blowing. She was pro-trans, and then when the wind was, and then she became anti-trans.
So what would happen if the Democrats win? Again, we should keep this in mind because this is the backdrop to Tucker Carlson announcing that he wants to start a third party, which, by the way, is nonsense. I'll explain that he's lying in a second. But what would happen if Democrats were to win? You need to understand the stakes to understand the game that Tucker is playing, which is a very dangerous game. Well, first off, judicial nominees. So Justice Clarence Thomas, you may have noticed the Supreme Court is pretty important, right? That the Supreme Court makes decisions that affect all of us on a wide level. And you can either have people in positions of power who are going to do things like strike down Roe versus Wade, or curb the administrative state, or ensure the checks and balances of the Constitution, or you can have a bunch of leftists who greenlight every left-wing policy. Well, Justice Thomas is currently 78. Justice Samuel Alito is 76. Unless either one of them or both retire in the next couple of months, if Democrats win the Senate, you are likely to see them replaced at some point by a left-leaning member of the Supreme Court. If you had two justices who shift from right to left or from originalist to the living Constitution crew, you end up with a majority on the Supreme Court in favor of every radical social and fiscal and foreign policy that the Democrats could ever imagine. Full-scale disaster area. So yes, the Senate matters an awful lot. Democrats, of course, they're going to start stacking up the district courts as well. They're going to start moving those district courts in the direction of left-wing social policy. If they were to gain control of the Senate, they would move to impeach President Trump. There's an outside shot. They could even get a conviction in a Senate split between a Democratic majority and...
Yeah, but if the Democrats wins the House and Republican keep the Senate, and the Democrat try to impeach Trump, it's not going to work because the Senate are going to reject it. They're going to reject their attempt at impeaching Trump. Now, it is possible that Republican, after the midterm, are going to turn against Trump because he won't be running in 2028. So Republican might stab Trump in the back if Democrats wins the House and then they try to impeach Trump, and then they might vote on impeachment. It's just a thought.
And maybe some rogue Democratic senators. They, of course, will stymie any effort to refund our military, to restock. If the Democrats control the Senate in 26 and the House in 26, then they are one step away from having trifecta in 28. Now, listen, Republicans have an uphill battle in 26. We all know this. It's an off-year election. This is normal. What's exacerbating that, other than the obvious fact of the president's unpopularity, but what's truly exacerbating that is a group of people purportedly on the right who are openly saying they want the Republicans to lose. Tucker Carlson is doing this. This is Tucker's entire game.
It's Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes said the Democrat needs to be strong in 2026, so it will lead to an opening for an outsider to potentially win the GOP nomination in 2028 and potentially win the presidency in 2028.
And Tucker Carlson wants the Republicans to lose because what he wants is a party that takes the place of the Republican Party, that mirrors all the presumptions of the woke left, except for trans, basically. Tucker Carlson truly dislikes the country. There's no way to consistently watch his show and believe otherwise. He literally had on an arms dealer from Russia named Victor Bout the other day to talk about the evils of America. Tucker Carlson thinks that America is a tool of evil, capitalist, globalists, and all that kind of stuff. Of course, many of them are Jewish. It's just a coincidence when he says that kind of stuff. When he pushes this crap, when he has on every anti-Semite he can on his show, it's all a coincidence. It's just strange that it works out that way. But his view is that America is a tool of evil, capitalist, globalists who want to cram down their version of America on the poor, common man. And here is a rando to talk about the evils of the Old Testament in order to show you. Tucker does not actually like any of the things that classically have made America awesome. So Tucker Carlson, for example, does not like free markets. You'll recall him praising feudalism over free markets. Feudalism.
And also, I watched the chick on the right, and then I saw one of the check of the on the right article, and it said that Tucker Carlson used to be a Democrat. So Tucker Carlson, he used to be a Democrat in 2006 to 2020. It was from 2020 to 2026 that he was a Republican.
Feudalism is so much better than what we.
So I can understand why he doesn't like free market because he was a Democrat. That's what I heard from when when I watched one of the Chick on the Right live stream. I heard that from them.
We have now, because at least in feudalism, the leader is vested in the prosperity of the people he rules.
Right.
You know, if all your serfs die, you starve.
There is not an enemy of America that he does not adore. He was praising Nicolas Maduro before the Trump administration ousted Maduro.
Nicolas Maduro and his government are very left-wing on economics, not on social policy, by the way, which is kind of interesting. In Venezuela, gay marriage is banned, abortion is banned, sex changes for transgenderism are banned. One of the very few countries in the entire hemisphere with those policies. It is on social policy, not defending the regime, just saying. One of the most conservative countries in North or South or Central America. Only El Salvador really comes close.
He has praised pretty much every jihadi group he can imagine, or pretended they don't exist. Hamas, it turns out, is a political group, actually. He doesn't know much about these places. And it turns out that Muslims have been victimized by the Western world, not the other way around.
And you notice, like in ISIS and that's why they're so angry.
Mm-hmm. Tucker, of course, has said that Iran is actually the wondrous force in the region. And Tucker's unending lavish praise for Vladimir Putin is laughable at this point. So now here's the actual story of the day. Tucker is discussing launching a third party. Right? This is the shtick. Now, you see why he's doing this. His friends are getting kicked out of the government, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Joe Kent or Thomas Massey. And so he says he's going to start something new. So he did an interview with the Columbia Journalism Review this week. And here's what he said, quote, "I do know what really matters is war and finance. Where does the money come from? Where does it go? And who gets killed? And on those questions, the parties are in lockstep solidarity with each other." Now, again, that is a lie. It is not true. If you think that there's no distinction between Democrats and Republicans on how taxing works, where the money comes from, how markets work, how foreign policy ought to work, if you think that they're the same, it's because you're stupid or because you're lying. And I don't think Tucker is stupid. I think he's lying. He says that's not a democracy. That's a one-party state posing as a democracy, and it needs to be broken. And there's going to be a third party, and I'm going to do everything I can to bring that about. And that's the lesson of the last 2.5 months to me. If you vote for Trump and you still wind up in a regime change war, then we need options. Or else let's just give up and be ruled by the most unscrupulous people. And I'm just too young to accept that. We need a third party. I'm going to help build a third party, he says. There should be a good faith effort to figure out what benefits the country. And then he goes into his nationalist socialist spiel. I mean, if you make $60,000 a year, you're degraded. Your life expectancy has gone down, and the promise of your children's lives is likely gone. That is not true. That is not true. Upward mobility in the United States remains. And then he says, no one seems to care, which is, of course, Tucker's constant refrain, is that all the people who oppose his bizarre and unsavory policy prescriptions just don't care. They're not caring enough. Very feminized left-wing language from Tucker Carlson on a consistent basis. What about Hamas? He says, I officially don't care about Hamas. Well, that's weird because the dude talks about the Middle East more than literally anyone who does a broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. Me, I'm not well versed in Middle East, on the Middle East, but that's a good point. I actually don't really watch the show. Maybe I will see clips on that will float around on X, but I don't really watch Tucker Carlson show.
Tucker Carlson. He cannot stop talking about the Middle East. He's obsessed with it. He says the US government should have as its first priority the welfare of its own people, which of course I agree with. Then he says, I don't want to be a candidate. And then he says, I was tempted to say to the New York Times, I'm running on a pro-patriarchy ticket just to make sure I gain no new fans. This is always Tucker shtick. He says a bunch.
Yeah, and then Candace Owens was in Russia, and she said that she's pushing Tucker Carlson to run for president in 2028. But now that he allegedly left the Republican Party, then who this candidate who will embody all of Tucker Carlson value is going to be?
Bunch of left-wing stuff, and then he throws out sort of a right-wing red meat red herring, and then he goes on his merry way. By the way, in this interview, he says that he would deport Seb Gorka, a foreign policy advisor to the president, but that he would not deport Mahmoud Khalil, the Hamas supporter. So that's who Tucker Carlson is. So here's the thing. Tucker has no intention of starting a third party. That is not his actual game. He's not going to do that. He's too lazy. He has another game that he has in mind.
Yeah, third party, yeah. But RFK Jr. did create a third party. He created the third party, his independent third party in 2024. And the reason why he dropped out of the presidential race is because there were no clear path for him to win. Once they pushed Biden out of the race, it was over. And by him staying in the race, he would have helped the Democrats win. That's why RFK Jr. made that unselfish decision on dropping out of the race and backing Trump for a cabinet position. I think RFK Jr. had the best chance at handing in the White House as a third party candidate if Biden had stayed in the race. And he had access to poll that showed him he was beating Biden and Trump head to head. He had higher favorability than both Biden and Trump. And I remember one of his campaign he said he only needed 34% of the independent vote to win the presidential election as a third party candidate. But all of this was ruined when the Democrat pushed Biden out of the race.
Explain that game in just 1 second. You might think that because it solves that problem. So it's something to ideologically Ben Shapiro show. Okay, so back to Tucker. What is Tucker doing here? He's not launching a third party. Okay, Tucker is not stupid. He is ideologically vile, but he is not stupid. He's not going to run a third party because third parties fail. So it's something to take the most obvious comp here. The Reform Party, right? The Reform Party started off as an afterthought by Ross Perot. So Ross Perot ran as an independent candidate in 1992, and he was focused largely on the evils of NAFTA and the idea that global economics was bad and all the rest of this. And then he withdrew in July, and then he jumped back in October, and he ended up with 19% of the popular vote, which was the highest percentage for a third party since Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Party in 1912. Well, in 95, he launched the actual Reform Party, and this was a giant dud. It was an attempt to build out an actual party infrastructure. Now, this is very hard. The United States is built for a two-party system because to build a national infrastructure is extremely costly. It is very difficult. Perot ended up.
Yeah, RFK Jr. did that. But once Biden was out of the, once the Democrat pushed Biden out of the race, it was over. There were no path for victory for her.
Ended up winning about 8% of the national popular vote in 1996. And then you saw kind of sporadic reform candidates who would occasionally win. So in 1998, Jesse Ventura, the wrestler, was elected governor of Minnesota on the reform ticket. But by 2000, there was a big split in the Reform Party, and Pat Buchanan was the nominee. He had left the Republican Party in ire after running and losing in the primaries in 1992. Jesse Ventura then left the party, denouncing it as dysfunctional. And by the time Buchanan ran in 2000, he won 0.5% of the popular vote, and many of the Reform Party voters basically merged back into the GOP. So here's the thing. I hope Tucker launches a third party. Why? Because it'll get crushed. Third parties get crushed. I would love to see a clean referendum on Tucker's perverse views, but he's not going to do that. That's not actually the game.
And also, yeah, I don't think Tucker Carlson would be successful with his third party that he's trying to create. But let's just assume I'm wrong and he's successful with his third party. All he's going to do is hurt the Republican. He's going to divide the vote, and which will help Democrats win. Trump understood that. And that's why he did not form a third party, because he knew he will divide the vote, and which will help Democrats win. The only thing he did was not picking Mike Pence as his VP after Mike Pence did something so egregious, certifying a fraudulent election.
The game. Tucker knows, Tucker sees that Republicans are probably going to have a bad 26. What he wants is to say that the reason that Republicans had a bad 26 is because they alienated key people like him. And thus, if you wish to win in 28, you need to shift the entire policy making direction of the party back in Tucker Carlson's direction. Tucker is not launching the Reform Party. Tucker is launching the DSA or the TSA, the Tucker Socialists of America.
Yeah.
His goal is for Republicans to lose in 2026. He wants, he's not hiding the ball here. He has said he's not voting Republican. He wants Republicans to lose. He is here to demoralize conservatives prior to 2026. That is the goal. The worse Republicans do, the more Tucker can then try and pretend that the reason Republicans lost is because they disappointed voters like Tucker Carlson. Now, again, the reality is that if Republicans lose in 26, there will be a lot of factors. It's an off-year election. Trump is unpopular and has been unpopular for legitimately a year at this point.
Yeah, he's been unpopular. Trump has been unpopular.
But if Republicans don't do well in 2026, it's not because Tucker and his 5 friends didn't vote for Republicans, but that's the entire game. The entire game is to say, I'm launching a third party because there's so much anger. There is so much upset that my third party is a legitimate force in American politics, but he's not going to do that because that would actually test the proposition. He's not going to do that. That is the goal. Don't you see? Don't you get it? You need us, Republican Party. You must shift all of your policy prescriptions over toward the pro-Putin, pro-Iran, pro-China, anti-America side. You have to do that. What Tucker is doing here is not launching some sort of rival to the Republican Party. He's standing outside the Republican Party and then saying that because they didn't hand it to him, that's why we lost. That's the goal. And that is just yet another reason why we actually have to fight, because people who care about the country, people who deeply care about those fundamental.
Okay, but I mean, if he wants the Republican Party to be handed to him, he can just run. He can just wait and see how things go. If the Trump administration ends up being such a disaster and it hurts Rubio and Chance And if the Trump administration ends up being a disaster and it hurts Rubio and Vance by association, Tucker Carlson can enter the Republican primary in 2028 and try to see if he can get the nomination.